Now this is a great question, tricky. So alpha is acute and tan alpha equals x. Find in terms of x, 180 minus alpha. Right, different ways of doing this. What we've been doing recently, and I think is very useful here for this sort of question, is using a cast diagram, finding out where the angle that we're looking at, finding out where it is. Well, it's 180. 180 in the cast diagram would be here, because you go around this way, same as a unit circle, and that would be 90, so that would be 180. Well, that's 180. Alpha less than 180, bearing in mind alpha is acute, so it's less than 90 degrees. It's definitely going to be in that quadrant. So if I subtracted alpha from 180, we end up about there, and we know it's in that quadrant. Well, I know that alpha is going to make the same, well, if alpha makes the same angle, and it does in every single quadrant, we can use that information. I know tan of alpha is plus x. Now in this quadrant, tan of something, cos of something, sine of the angle, they would all be positive. And it is, so tan of alpha is plus x. However, if it is in this quadrant, only sine of alpha would be a positive value. So it's going to be the same value, or similar value. It's going to be x, but it's going to be minus x. Sorry, I don't know why I'm writing that out when I want to write. This tan 180 minus alpha would just be negative x. To maybe try to reinforce understanding of this, let's go into some of the other quadrants. So, if I wanted to find this angle, which would be 180 plus alpha, so tan, which it's not asking me for, but just to try and, hopefully help some of you understand the point. In that quadrant, the value of tan would be positive, so it goes back to being x again. And then in the final quadrant, here, if I make an angle of alpha with the x-axis, say that would be 360 minus alpha, so tan 360 minus alpha, well, the value of tan would be negative, so it'd be minus x. And that's all it is. So tan would be positive here and here, and it would be negative here and here. And because we're looking at this quadrant, where only sine is positive, the value of tan 180 minus alpha would be negative x. Useful sort of mnemonic device, these sorts of questions, the cast diagram. Pretty tricky, I think, the different ways you could approach it. I think this is the easiest way. So if I know tan of alpha is x, I can draw a right angle triangle of that situation, and I can rewrite x as x over 1. This is true. And I also know that that is the opposite over the adjacent. So in my special right angle triangle I'm going to draw for the situation, if that is alpha here, then opposite that angle, the opposite is x, and the adjacent is 1. So I can use a right angle triangle, I can set up a right angle triangle to represent the situation. Well, if this angle is 90, and angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees, which they do, then the remaining angle is going to be 180 minus 90 minus alpha, which in other words is 90 minus alpha, which is the angle we're looking at. So if this angle then is 90 minus alpha, if I'm trying to work out tan 90 minus alpha, well, I need to look at, well, that's going to be opposite over adjacent. So I can use my triangle that I set up here. So if I'm looking at that red angle, I've got to think, well, what's opposite that red angle? Well, it's 1. So it's going to be 1 over, and what's adjacent? Well, it's the x. So it's going to be 1 over x. It's going to be the inverse. So that's, I think, quite a neat little trick you can use. You can set up your own triangle and just use SOHCAHTOA from that to solve that problem.